All right, everybody, we're back for another episode of the State of Chiropractic. And man, we have got a legend today. You guys hear me all the time talking about the work that we're doing all across the country on behalf of chiropractic and the battles that we're facing and talking to you about the idea of the profession needing to organize. That's the only way that we will sustain and actually conquer not only the attacks against us, but the opportunities before us. And man, we are talking today to Dr. Lou Sportelli. If you don't know him, you've been under a rock. Dr. Sportelli has really been the original OG when it comes to defending and representing and standing up for chiropractic, both individually as a guy back during the 70s and 80s that was leading massive defense of our profession, but also by creating NCMIC and creating a defense for chiropractic from a malpractice side that wasn't held hostage to the mathematical formulas of insurance companies and banking systems. So Dr. Sportelli, first of all, thank you so very much for being willing to carve out some time for me today. It is an honor to be able to talk with you. And you're in Pennsylvania now, correct?
That's correct. Always right. Actually.
Okay.
I've been in Pennsylvania. Graduated from Palmer College in 1962. And just ironically, as we talked about legislation, I wanted to go to Connecticut to practice. And back then, if you didn't graduate from a certain school, you couldn't get into Connecticut. So I graduated from Palmer, and they wouldn't let me in the state. So I came back home to Pennsylvania. So, and we were pretty much a Palmer state in Pennsylvania. So yeah, it's kind of funny how things have changed over the years.
Well, yeah, and you've had a front seat with a lot of that because you've been pretty engaged and involved and motivated in chiropractic. I know back then I've heard stories about BJ telling graduating classes when they were graduating that if your attitude is what is chiropractic going to do for you, you're going to fail. But if you can graduate knowing that you have to put back into the profession right away, we will succeed. And I know that generation, your generation, was really indoctrinated with this idea that this only grows if you grow it, and not like sitting back and waiting for the success and the wealth to come, but you had to go and expand this beautiful thing that you've been given. And you did that. So, I mean, your heritage is just insane. We don't have time to go through all of it today, but one of the primary things I want to talk with you, why I have you, is your vantage point of being the tip of the spear for so many years on behalf of this profession, being a target within the profession. I know you have as many scars in your back as I do, because you take a stand and you lead. And a lot of times our profession is just known for circling the wagons and shooting inward rather than organizing and working outward. But from your perspective, sitting where you have now, the purview you have with, the history behind you, talk to us a little bit about your perspective and feeling of kind of the things you went through, where chiropractic is now, your optimism, your concern. I want you to brain dump on me kind of where you're at, because your vantage point is so unique. You're probably the only person alive in chiropractic right now that has the perspective that you have. And I would just love to get a glimpse of that.
Well, thank you. 60 years in the profession does give you a little bit of a vantage point. So you can kind of look at the profession from 30,000 feet. That gives you a very different perspective than when you're on the ground. The foundational basis, however, is kind of interesting, Bharon, and that is that your own personal experiences, every one of us who are in this fight, are looking at it from our vantage point. Where did we start? And so if you started in the 60s like I did, or you start in 2023, your vantage point is going to be very, very different. So one of the things that is the interesting part about it is that when I started chiropractic college and graduated in 1962, little did we realize as a profession that in 1963, the AMA was going to form its Committee on Quackery, whose goal was to contain and eliminate, think of those two words, contain and eliminate the profession of chiropractic, and nobody knew about it. So here you are operating during the 60s and early 70s, under somebody's conspiratorial siege to essentially eliminate you, and you don't know why. So as a practitioner, you almost got to the point where you thought, am I nuts, or is some of my colleagues nuts, because we didn't understand why doors were closed. I mean, if you know your enemy and you know the door's closed, okay, you can understand it. But you didn't understand why hospitals were rejecting you, or why medical physicians were refusing to accept your referrals, or why you couldn't use a publicly funded hospital to take x-rays. I mean, none of that made any sense. I mean, it was like we were spurned, but you didn't know why. So all during the time of the 60s, however, and here I always look at the positive and negative. The negatives obviously were what I just alluded to. The positives, however, was that if you were a chiropractor, a patient coming into you, you better do a good job of educating them. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a two-edged sword. If you educated that patient that walked in your door because they were pulling the money out of their pocket, you better do a good job or they're not coming back.
Right.
So the educational focus of what chiropractic is, what its benefit was, the value to the patient became the chiropractor's responsibility, and many of them did a great job. I mean, we had tremendous amount of us that had enormously successful practices during the 60s and 70s when everything was against you. So how do you do that? Well, you do that by making sure that the end user, the consumer, knows what it is they're doing.
Yep.
I believe what happened in a negative situation is when insurance, and by the way, we were cash practices. When insurance came in, the DCs got lazy and they didn't educate their patients. They basically treated the insurance aspect of it, and we lost a lot of educational piece during that time. So, having said that, however, when the initial information regarding the AMA came out in the sore throat documents, where they were landed on our doorstep, I can remember like it was yesterday, this brown envelope, which I still have the envelope it came in. And it came on a Saturday morning, and I couldn't wait to finish practice so I can look at this thing. And after you read it, it was like a weight lifted off your shoulders. Not that anything changed. The only thing that changed is now you understood why. Mm-hmm. Well, once you understand why, then the question is, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Well, many of the state associations and many of the national associations, the ICA, to their credit, basically jumped on board rather quickly when the lawsuit was about to be filed. The ACA kind of held back a little bit because of the, how should I say, the conservative nature of their general counsel. But when you think about that issue and litigation, and now you're involved in a lot of litigation around the world, think about the fact that you couldn't find a law firm
willing to do it.
That was willing to sue the AMA.
I've been there. So, it's insane.
So the fact of the matter is, and that's the ploy they use today, even. I mean, most of your social media companies and so forth employ most of the counsel on retainer so that you can't go to them because they are a conflict of interest if they're going to sue you. Yep. So, I mean, let me put it this way. The execution of the strategy to contain and eliminate this was brilliant. Mm-hmm. Absolutely brilliant. So seeking counsel to sue was an enormous challenge.
Yeah.
And here again, I use the word divine intervention only because it was divine intervention that we had a guy like Jerry McAndrews, who was involved in the profession as a DC, executive director of the ICA, and his brother George. And finally, it coaxed his brother to take on the case. And if it weren't for the fact that there was that law firm, and frankly, it cost George an awful lot. He even had to change law firm.
Yep.
Simply because the profession, here again, didn't have the money, the funding mechanism. So everybody was saying, well, if all the chiropractors give, well, that's ridiculous. It just doesn't happen that way. I mean, get real. Well, so what you have to do when you're going to go to attack a situation like this is, okay, who is in the trenches with me? I can count them. And if I can count them and they're there, that's all you need, really. The rest will join, or they become irrelevant, or you can't focus what you're going to do on what somebody else is not.
Correct.
So the bottom line is the fundraising for the Wilk litigation continued, and George never really did get paid all that he needed to get paid. So once the suit came, however, what most don't understand is the AMA wasn't finished just because we sued them. We lost the first suit. Why did we lose the first suit? Because the first suit brought up every single thing that was negative to chiropractic and had nothing to do with the litigation. Yeah. We were suing because there was a economic barrier, an economic boycott. That's what they wanted to cut off anything that would provide funding for chiropractic. So thankfully, the first lawsuit, we lost the first lawsuit, and there was a jury on the first lawsuit, and we lost it. And I remember, Bharon, why you said initially that I've got some scars. Yes, I do, because frankly, part of the AMA's argument at that time was, look at these crazy chiropractors and look at what they're doing and look at what they're advertising and look at how they're promoting practice management. And it was the most unethical kind of situations you could have, and that they would bring those up in front of the jury. And so, and I recall, interestingly enough, a call from George after one day in the courtroom, and he said to me, Louis said, I'll tell you, he said, I'm hearing all this stuff. He said, and I can listen to it. What bothers me is there's not one group that has denounced those procedures. So by your silence, you have condoned them.
Yeah.
And so I recall writing an article called Avarice and Greed. And of course, needless to say, many arrows were pointed to me because that's Now, did some of our practice management folks help? Absolutely. It saved a lot of DCs who had no idea about business, had no idea. They saved them and created the success of their practice. But at what cost? You have to, everything has its cost. So the first suit we lost, and fortunately it was appealable. And the second suit, George did something that was absolutely brilliant in litigation, and that is he did not want a jury. He wanted a bench trial. He wanted a judge who could understand the nuances and complexities of a case that was being alleged that there was an economic boycott to the profession. I mean, when you think about it, one of our principal people who was one of the experts who absolutely helped win the case is a guy by the name of Bharon Hoag. He's a PhD from Michigan. And basically he outlined why the economic boycott to the chiropractors cost money. For example, every chiropractor in the United States had no opportunity to use the hospital facilities for x-ray. So they had to buy, back in the 60s and 70s, buy an x-ray machine in order to be able to take an x-ray. Yeah. Well, that's an economic, that's an unbelievable cost. Yeah. So Dr. Stano demonstrated why that was a problem, and then demonstrated also the clout that the AMA had relative to insurance coverage and so forth and so on. And we had a brilliant judge, again, divine intervention, that we got somebody who understood it. And it wasn't very long before we won the second case. That opened up the entire world of chiropractic. I mean, things happened quietly that nobody even realizes that its origin came back to the success of the Wilk.
100%.
So when you are involved in those kinds of things, like you are now in your new venture, you've got to have a core of individuals who are committed. rain or shine. They're going to do what they need to do because they believe in it. And just because there's 70,000 chiropractors in the United States, you can't use 70,000 as your number.
No,
frankly, if you use 1,000 as your number, you're probably optimistic. Yeah. And so the fact of the matter is, but interestingly enough, 1,000 committed chiropractors can pretty much do anything.
You're 100%. We actually have our goal, arguably worldwide, we have about 180,000 licensed chiropractors, the give or take, because not every country registers them. So some of it's there, but it's about in that mark. And when, we have a slogan that we're launching right now that says 10,000 chiropractors moving in any direction are unstoppable. And we saw that 1,000 number. You're right, because that's what we had in Australia when we were defending for the vaccine rights. We had 900 Australians connected to us, and the work that we were able to get done and the ability to navigate. It's not even the economics. It's the ability to navigate that many people at the same time, the same way, going in one direction. We literally stunted the government of Australia because they didn't know what to do, because they couldn't keep up with how all of our people were doing the right thing I would shoot a video, and the next day I had 900 chiropractors having this sign in their window. And then all of a sudden they didn't know what to deal with that. And then they would try to repeal that. So it was the power of yes, the economics, because we couldn't have done it without those individuals giving us financial support. But the idea of moving that many people in one direction at one time, our profession has never understood the power of that. I think, out of the womb, we start believing that we're the redheaded stepchildren and that we have a chip on our shoulder and it's just going to be a fight forever. If we could start understanding and seeing the win, similar to what you guys did with Wilkes, because that wasn't the entire profession, as you've already, alluded to. That was just a few people and very strong and committed people, and then a number of other people that were helping financially. But there's our profession. The one thing our profession has and has always had with most of these issues is the truth. We stand on the truth. We are committed to giving truth to people in healthcare. So we're not doing, there's a lot of scams. There's a lot of gimmicks and things within chiropractic that chiropractors use to try to grow their practices. I agree. I'm glad you wrote that paper those years ago. I get a lot of darts because I'm very matter of fact about, some of the games that people play to increase their patient dollar or the visit dollar average. And it's like, we got to get back to just telling people about chiropractic. But when we're leading with truth, it makes it so much easier to take these battles on if we can sustain the fight, because every time they throw lies and a bigotry, and we're dealing this with Australia right now with the pediatric issue, they just reinstated that policy that chiropractors cannot do a high amplitude, low velocity adjustment to 2 and under. And they're using as their reasoning for this one case that they're claiming a chiropractor fractured a vertebra of a newborn, which after that was researched, it was found that they just had a genetic anomaly. It had nothing to do with the adjustment, but of course they're leaving that part out, and they're using the soundbite in the media, right? So now that because we have truth on our side, we're launching a massive PR campaign in Australia, just rebutting everything they're saying against us, because it's all rebuttable. Like, all of it is false information. So that's what I loved about what you did. I've watched a lot of the interviews you had on TV, and you were getting annihilated by these MDs. They were calling you names. They were mocking you on national television, like all of this stuff. And your resolve, because you knew the truth and you could confront everyone. That's the power that we've always had if we could continue to organize. And I just want to thank you personally for being that warrior back then, because there weren't many people that were willing to get on television knowing that you were being set up and still stand there and as strongly and boldly as you did represent chiropractic. And it will forever be one of the things that I will cherish about my involvement in this profession is being able to do the work now that you guys were doing then. It's just incredible.
Well, and it's interesting, Barry, you look at the landscape. Back in the 50s and 60s, 70s and 80s, those were decades that required legislation and litigation.
Yeah.
Okay. We won a lot of those battles. There's no question about it. And you're continuing to win some target specific issues now. And then all of a sudden the realization comes, okay, so now that we have all this, how do we sustain ourselves? Well, the only way you sustain yourself, and that's why my entire focus and shift came from the process of research. Once the research aspect comes into being, because research is ubiquitous, and once it's out there, and once there's enough people to see this, nothing stops it, and the research continues on to evolve, and all of the research that's happening today. Matter of fact, I just kind of smile is the back in the 60s were the era of survival. So you came into me, let's assume, with a back problem, which is what most people came to chiropractors back then, with back and neck problems. And then you'd come in 2 or 3 weeks later and say, I'm sleeping better, doc, or I'm feeling better, I don't have as much indigestion. Well, I didn't frankly care, because I was in survival mode. Right. I mean, I wanted to get you better for your initial problem, your back problem. I wanted to get you better for that, and educate you on why you need to come back. I never documented all the other comorbidities. Yeah. Well, now you fast forward, Bharon, to 2022, when they're now starting to show the comorbidities that exist with spinal ailments. Mm-hmm. And nothing could make me happier than to know that the research that we're going to be able to do is going to tie what we did with the original adjustment to the comorbidities of people's ailments that afflict them every single day. Yeah. And one of the problems we've had is there's nothing sexy about musculoskeletal problems. There's just nothing sexy about it. I mean, there's sexy issues about heart transplants and this kind of technology, but when you stop and think about it for a moment, that 50% of the actual population suffer around the world from some kind of neuromusculoskeletal problem. And when you compound that not only with the pain that they experience, but the lost time and productivity. Yeah. Wow. And the disability that it ultimately comes into play. And now we're starting to understand that it also has a mental issue when you are in pain for a long time. When you think about that, I mean, if we did nothing else but focus on that, there's not going to be any issues that are going to come around to say that chiropractic is not valuable. Yeah, 100%. What I think is going to happen in the next 5 or so years. Look, we have a failed healthcare system. There's no question about it. The system cannot sustain the financial economics of a fee for service. Yep. It just can't. The more you do, the more you get paid for. Well, but that's procedural. It's not therapeutic. Yeah. And so once the realization is that there need to change the model, chiropractic, and just from the 50% of the neuromusculoskeletal problems, is going to be sought after like nobody's business. Yeah. Yeah. I'm absolutely convinced that we're almost at that point where there will be a paradigm shift. Yeah.
And primarily, to kind of tap into that, it's because they're finally starting to see us as the solution to their problem to help them continue to sustain a portion of their model, right? I mean, as you said, it's a failed system because the system is built to perpetuate sickness to enable the fee-for-service model. I mean, that's just, it's a capitalistic society. And right now, unfortunately, the biggest victim of our capitalistic society is health and the health of our citizens. And so whether you go as deep as vaccines or you go all the way just to how they're managing pain or even what happens after surgery, right? I mean, the tail that goes on of care after a primary procedure is so ridiculously long. And, we've looked at all of that data and work that I've done previously before of what we're doing now with OneChiropractic. And, I've sat in front of the heads of Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they've looked at us and said, we know you guys can save us money, but it would cripple our economic system if we did it. I mean, it's just built. So I agree with you. I think we're getting to the point, you had the opioid crisis, which exposed a lot. Then you had the vaccine, which exposed a lot, and the way that they forced that down everyone's throat. And now all the data is coming out about the economics and why a lot of that happened. You're right. Between the amazing amounts of research, which again, I'm going to thank you publicly for that as well. People don't realize that your foundation funds a large percentage of the research that's happening in this profession. And people don't know it. You guys are not glory hounds, but you do the due diligence and the work. And it's one of the reasons I'm such a fan of NCMIC, is NCMIC has always taken the money and put it back into the profession. And unlike really any other organization I know, honestly. And the amount of money, I mean, we both have a dear friend, Dr. Heidi Havik, that's she's doing those neat little studies that are showing the diversity of the impact of chiropractic, whether it's to the prefrontal cortex or whether it's to looking at what segment. And, she's just doing great stuff. But you guys are the ones that are doing a lot of that funding, and it's just incredible. And I want the world to know that, because it's very important that those people that are helping to support and sustain this work that's being done is recognized. But I agree with you. I think the world is in a place now where they're defining health differently. I think we're producing research on a level that we've never done before. And another thing to kind of tie this back to the 60s, we also have a perfect storm of that generation of doctors that grew up as part of that, the Committee on Quackery, that were told in their code of ethics that they could not refer or work with chiropractors. It was it was almost a civil rights issue. It was a race issue back then. And those people are dying off and retiring. And who's replacing them are the kids in the 80s that, when we had our big boom and we were seeing everybody and we had mega clinics all over the place, those kids are now taking over the place. So they're open. They don't have that indoctrinated mindset that chiropractic is evil. They may not understand it. They may not refer to it, but they're not against it. So all of these perfect storm elements are hitting right now, which is why we're pushing so hard to say, organize, or we don't have to organize around a belief. And I think that's what chiropractic has always tried to do. It's tried to say, here's what I believe. I want to surround myself with everyone that believes the way that I do. And you're only going to get small clusters. But if we just organize around the idea that there's such an opportunity for our profession right now, I don't care if you're mechanistic, vitalistic, straights, mixers, whatever stupid terminology you want to throw at me, I love you because you have a DC after your name. And I want to create a world that you still have the freedom to practice the way you want to practice within the confines of the laws of your state. And if anyone encroaches upon those, we're going to defend you, because you have the right to do DRT physicals if you want to. You have the right to do rehab. You have the right to do nutrition, and you have the right to do nothing more than just touch an atlas on everybody that comes in. I'm okay with all of that, because chiropractic should and needs and requires the opportunity to be able to grow and expand, because we're such a solution to a lot of the problems that all of these other organizations and industries are looking for. And yeah, so I don't mean to get on a soapbox, but I just agree 100%.
There's no question. And I tell you, Bharon, I often say, I don't know where the profession would be without NCMIC and without NCMIC's foundation. And I don't know that there's enough DCs who really appreciate what has happened and what the foundation has been able to do. We've been able to break barriers. Who would have dreamed 20 years ago that we would have DCs in a PhD program at Harvard and Yale and University of Minnesota?
Right.
And now, so the bottom line is we've looked at the landscape and we said, okay, where are the barriers to entry? And thanks to the foundation, NCMIC Foundation, thanks to the NCMIC policyholders who give back some of their premium dividend. The foundation my goal was to build 25. Why did I do that? Well, I tell you what, all the years I was in practice, and we would see, for example, ladies' auxiliaries where the chiropractor would give money to the ladies' auxiliary. So it came out of the left pocket and went into the right pocket. I said, wait a minute, what we need is external funding. Yeah. So if we have $25 million as a core in the foundation, we'd spin off about $1 million a year in perpetuity.
Yep.
For the advancement of, is that a lot of money? No, but it's a lot of money for us.
Yes, it is.
And targeted properly, it can do an awful lot. And obviously the track record of NCMIC has proven that. I think we have 37 or something like that DC PhDs that are now involved in the. So we needed to look at the landscape. We needed to see what degrees were necessary. We needed to see where DCs could now become outside of the profession, involved in areas that would now advance the profession in a very different way. And I tell you, I just shake my head a lot of times and say, where would the profession be without NCMIC Foundation?
And I'll be the first, and I'm going to be completely candid. And Dr. Wayland knows this, or not Wayland, Wayne, now I can't remember his name.
Wayne Wolfson.
Thank you, Wolfson. I don't know why I was saying Wayland. Wayne Wolfson, when, I've become great friends with him over the last few years, just learning. And I'm going to be the first to tell you, I did not know the breadth that NCMIC has, all of the things that you guys have done. And you want to talk about turning $1 into $1 billion. You guys have found a way to make it's money people are already spending, but you can spend it in a way to keep it in the profession and perpetuate that dollar over and over and over again, whether it's your malpractice, whether it's your car insurance, whether it's your liability insurance in your office, whether it's your credit card processing. All of those things, you guys have just always found ways to be able to support a chiropractor, to give them great rates so they're not overpaying for any of those services, but those dollars are going back into a pool that's getting perpetuated where that dollar now starts generating more. So if you want to consider yourself charitable, working with these organizations that are chiropractic based and owned and operated, you're putting the money back into the profession. It's one of the reasons I've always loved Kent Greenwald and what he's done with the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress and Foot Levelers and the amount of money they give. It's you're giving, yes, but not all that money's going in individual pockets. It's going back into the profession because the business model was built that way. And you're one of the few organizations that span the test of time. There are some that start off that way, but then just human desire and greed and quality of living and lifestyle take over and it stops. You have done it.
NCMIC's tagline is we take care of our own.
Yeah.
And boy, I want to tell you, that is absolutely true. We do take care of our own. We take care of our own into products that our DCs need, whether it's in malpractice insurance or merchant processing or credit cards or equipment loans or any of that. We looked at the landscape and said, okay, what do our doctors need? And we found what they needed and we attempted to fill it with the best possible product. And always with the idea that we take care of our own. And I love the company because of that model, is that there's always that we take care of our own basis for every decision that's being made in the company.
Yeah, I love it. And I've seen that to be true over the last couple of years as I've done a deep dive. Again, you and I've crossed paths a number of years. I'm celebrating my 27th year in the industry, and we've known each other and crossed, but I will be honest, it's been the last couple of years that I've delved in. And I do want to say this. We were talking about the arrows and the scars in our back. There was a period of time where, for whatever reason, I don't even know the heritage of it, but it was, you had NCMIC was the ACA malpractice, and then you had like Chiro Secure or Chiro Futures that were the ICA, malpractice. And I hate that our profession does that. I hate that you just have to throw somebody in a camp. Like, you can't just be a lover of the profession. You have to somehow be assigned to some belief system. And I was guilty of it. Dr. Stu Hoffman is a great friend of mine, and I've known Stu forever. And I love the work that Chiro Secure does as well. But I was guilty of that for a long time, of just saying, I respect Dr. Sportelli, but this group has this belief system. And it, I'm humbled, and I'm always the person to admit publicly when I have a wrong perception. And it was Dr. Wolfson, sitting down with me and talking and opening things up and letting me do my due diligence, so that when I speak about it now, I speak intelligently because I've done the due diligence. I've looked deep. I know what I'm saying. And I am forever a fan, and I'm a customer of NCMIC and a number of different product lines now that I know that stuff exists. And I want people, if you're watching this, I don't care where you're at. I'm going to do a selfish plug here for a request that I have. And Dr. Wolfson knows this, and so does David. Man, I really want you guys to get into Canada. I'm just telling you, I would really, really love, I know I'm pushing, I'm just dropping those seeds, but if you're watching this, whatever country you're watching this in, I hope you appreciated the history and the heritage, and you're seeing real life, one of the shoulders. We are standing on Dr. Sportelli's shoulders. He is one of the people that will forever go on my Mount Rushmore of individuals that have allowed my kids, who are chiropractors now, to continue to do what they do because of men like Dr. Sportelli. But if you're watching this, I want you to appreciate the work that's being done, the work that has been done on the shoulders of a million people. But really being a part of our profession means we have the opportunity to organize and grow it for the next generation. And that's what drives me every single day to do what I'm doing. Yes, I have my daughter's a chiropractor. My son's at Life University now. He'll be a chiropractor in the next couple of years. And I do it for them. I want to create a world where they have an opportunity to flourish and grow, and for all of the future generations of chiropractors. So yeah, Dr. Sportelli, I love you. I really do. I cannot thank you enough for who you are, what you've done, what you continue to do. You've been at it 60 years and you still have the same piss and vinegar in you that you had back then. And I absolutely love that as well. That is absolutely fantastic. And I'm honored to serve alongside you during these years. And I agree with you. I think the next 5 years are going to open up some opportunities. So any last minute words to our audience from all over the world?
No, well, the bottom line is we're still small enough as a profession that we can unite around a cause. And I think that whatever the cause is, for example, here in the U.S., we got Medicare. Mm-hmm. Why, after 50 years, we're still fooling with that? It's because there is not a force, to your point, a force strong enough to make a mark. We'll never do it. We'll never outweigh the dollars that the big companies or the AMA or any of the other groups will never do it with dollars. We have to do it with personal contacts and a dedication that nothing's going to stop us.
That's right.
And once you have that mindset, I mean, to your point, there really is nothing we couldn't accomplish in a number of years with strong leadership and a commitment from the profession that's where we want to go. 100%. And I thank you for that. I think that's an interesting perspective that even in the new company, you're the new involvement that you're doing with the litigation.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. And it is exciting, every day when we have victories and we're organizing more people. And like I said, we've been going now since 2021. And I mean, our whole mathematical strategy of the 33 was, one, that number means something when you look at it to the average chiropractor. Number two, it was a small enough amount that people weren't looking at it on their card to get rid of it. They're looking at other bigger ticket items. But our sustainability, we're at about, our retention rate's about 87%. So we've had people giving for 4 years. And I'm just so thankful that we, like you said, it takes that core group of believing people for us to be able to do the work that we're doing all over the world. And it's just amazing, and 92% of every dollar that comes in goes right to the fight. We only use 8% for administrative. So it's been incredible to learn from people like you and other organizations that have done things right, and us to find our niche of defending the right of the practicing chiropractor. And wherever the profession is under attack anywhere in the world, we will go and we will build a force and we will go and respond that. And I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Sportelli. You're one of the reasons that I do what I do every day, is because of how strongly you stood and how confident and how in love you were with the profession. Even at your own personal loss, you still stood strong and did.
I still am in love with the profession.
I know you are. I know you are. And you will be until the day you stop breathing. I know that. Exactly. I know that. But we love and appreciate you, Doc. Thank you again so much for everything you do for your heritage, your lineage, and the future successes you're going to have in the rest of your life. So we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. God bless.